I want you to sit back and just imagine something for a second. We're going to start with a little mental exercise today. A gut check, really, just to set the stakes for what we are exploring.
Oh, I love these.
Yeah, so imagine you are going about your normal week. Everything feels, perfectly routine. You grab your coffee, you open your laptop, or maybe you walk out to the physical mailbox at the end of the driveway, and a surprise bill lands right in your lap.
Uh-oh.
$500. And the absolute worst part, it is due tomorrow.
Wow. Yeah, that's rough.
Right. How do you feel in this exact moment, just hearing me describe that scenario? Does your chest, physically tighten up? Does your breathing get a little shallower?
I mean, for most people, the mind immediately starts racing.
Exactly. You instantly start cycling through a mental Rolodex of your credit cards, desperately trying to figure out which one has enough available balance, or mapping out which grocery runs you're going to have to skip for the next month just to cover it.
And that physical reaction you're describing it's incredibly common. For a massive percentage of people, just hearing that scenario out loud is enough to kick up some serious visceral anxiety.
It's a very real feeling.
Oh, absolutely. It triggers a genuine fight or flight response. The heart rate spikes. The cortisol floods the system. And what we are going to talk about today is exactly why that biological reaction happens when it comes to money and, well, far more importantly, how to systematically dismantle that feeling of panic permanently.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the start. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking on a massive, highly specific mission. We have pulled together a towering stack of incredibly practical, deeply researched financial guides, and they are all sourced from the curriculum over at the Growth Vault.
It's a great collection of material.
It really is. And I want to be super clear right up front about what this is and what this isn't. The goal of our conversation today is not about how to get rich overnight. We aren't here to, sell you a secret, convoluted crypto trading strategy. Right. And we certainly aren't pushing some weird real estate loophole.
There is absolutely no magic pill hidden in these sources. I mean, the material from the Growth Vault focuses entirely on foundational reality.
Exactly. Instead of chasing lightning in a bottle, we're going to spend our time today exploring the actual underlying unglamorous mechanics of early wealth building.
The stuff that actually works.
Yeah, the stuff that works. We're going to look at how to break those exhausting cycles of financial anxiety that keep so many people awake at night. We want to help you find absolute clarity and, build real sustainable momentum.
And to achieve that, we're going to synthesize insights across 5 core areas from the Growth Vault's materials. The underlying theme that connects every single source we review today is control.
Control, yeah.
It's about shifting you from being a passive passenger in your financial life, where you're just bracing for impact and reacting to whatever macroeconomic disaster happens next, to becoming an active owner of your resources.
Yeah.
Because right now, for so many people, money is just this abstract, shadowy thing that happens to them.
Rather than a precision tool they actually direct.
Exactly.
So, if the ultimate goal is control, where do we actually start? The sources make this brilliant point early on, that money becomes incredibly emotional, specifically when it is invisible.
Yes, the invisible money concept.
Right. I was reading this section of the guides, and I immediately thought of an analogy. Managing invisible money is exactly like having to walk through a pitch-black room in your own house late at night.
Oh, I know this feeling.
Right. You know there is clutter in there. You know someone left a pile of laundry, or worse, some incredibly sharp plastic children's toys scattered all over the hardwood floor.
The dreaded Legos.
Yes, the Legos. But because it's completely dark, you can't see exactly where the danger is. So every single step you take is filled with this spiked, agonizing anxiety because you're just waiting for the inevitable pain of stepping on one.
That visualization captures the essence of financial anxiety perfectly. Unclear money always feels vastly more dangerous than clear money. The human brain is, at its core, a prediction machine. When it lacks data, it just fills the void with worst-case scenarios.
It assumes the worst.
Always. The Growth Vault sources use a really striking, mathematically counterintuitive comparison to illustrate this. They ask you to look at 2 different people. Person A has $2,000 of acute financial pressure.
Okay, $2,000.
Let's say it's high-interest credit card debt or a stack of upcoming utility bills. But person A has a crystal clear, itemized plan on exactly how they are going to handle it over the next 3 months. They know exactly what's coming in and what's going out.
They have a map.
Exactly. Now look at person B. Person B only has $500 of pressure, a quarter of the debt. But person B had absolutely no map, no budget, and no idea what automated subscriptions are coming out of their checking account tomorrow morning.
Person A sleeps infinitely better, even though their actual burden is mathematically 4 times heavier.
Clarity lowers fear. Every time. When you turn the lights on in that dark room, the sharp toys are still on the floor, you know? The mess hasn't magically disappeared, but now you can navigate around them. Clarity gives your brain a highly specific, actionable job to do, instead of just letting it spin in generalized, exhausting panic.
But getting that clarity in the first place is like utterly terrifying for most people because of what the sources call the shame loop.
The shame loop is brutal.
It really is. When we actively avoid looking at our bank balances, we naturally build up this expectation that we're going to find something catastrophic. We tell ourselves, if I log into my banking app and look closely at the last 6 months of statements, I'm going to realize I've made one massive, embarrassing, life-ruining mistake that definitively proves I am just fundamentally terrible with money.
But the reality presented in the guides completely shatters that fear. And it is actually fantastic news. When people finally sit down and audit their accounts, it is almost never one huge, dramatic, life-destroying mistake.
Yeah.
You didn't accidentally buy a yacht.
Yep.
Usually, it is just 20 small, incredibly mundane decisions layered on top of each other.
It's the $20 impulse snack habit at the gas station on the way home from work. It's the $30 monthly subscription to a niche streaming service you genuinely haven't opened since last October.
Yeah.
Or it's the $40 in inflated food delivery fees because you were simply too emotionally exhausted to boil a pot of pasta on a rainy Tuesday.
And none of those single events feel dangerous in the moment. Your brain just dismisses a $20 charge as a rounding error. But mathematics does not care about the narrative you attach to the expense, right? Mathematics only cares that cash has left the ecosystem.
That's a harsh way to put it, but it's true.
And this is exactly what creates the shame loop. You feel vaguely bad that your checking account is perpetually hovering near zero, so you avoid looking at the numbers because looking at them forces you to confront the shame. But actively avoiding the numbers is exactly what allows the unused subscriptions and the overdraft fees to keep silently draining you in the background.
Because you aren't catching them.
Right. That makes the financial reality worse, which in turn creates an even deeper well of shame.
It's a brutal, self-sustaining cycle. You are bleeding out from 1,000 paper cuts while refusing to look at your own arm. So how do we actually break it? The sources outline a very specific, aggressive intervention called the 24-hour money reset.
This is such a powerful tool.
Yeah, and the literal first hour of this reset is fascinating to me because it is entirely passive. It's not about fixing anything yet. It is purely an intelligence gathering mission. You sit down, open every single financial account you have, and you document every single thing that came in and went out over the last 30 days.
And the golden rule here, the absolute non-negotiable instruction from the sources, is that you must do this with absolutely zero judgment.
Which is easier said than done.
Oh, for sure. But that lack of judgment is the psychological linchpin of the entire exercise. You are acting as an impartial auditor, not a punitive judge. You are just writing down the data points.
That's the fact.
Just the facts. Once you have that massive, raw list of transactions in front of you, the next step is categorization. You don't just stare at the mess. You sort it into 3 highly specific buckets.
Okay, let's go through the buckets.
The first bucket is survival. This is your housing, your basic utilities, essential groceries, transport to get to work, and the absolute minimum payments on your debts to keep the collectors away. These are the non-negotiables that keep the structural foundation of your life from collapsing.
Okay, and the second bucket they talk about is growth. I really liked how the sources define this. This isn't just, investing in the stock market.
No, it's broader than that.
Yeah. This bucket is for money spent on education, business tools, professional networking, or even crucial health interventions like therapy. It is capital deployed to actively make you stronger, more resilient, or to directly improve your future earning potential.
Which leaves us with the third and final bucket, which the guides label leakage.
I noticed this when reviewing the material. They don't call it fun. They don't call it entertainment. They specifically call it leakage.
It's a very intentional word choice.
What struck me about this isn't just that it's money leaving the account, but that it represents money spent on things that often don't even make us genuinely happy. It's the impulse buys, the forgotten apps, the late fees, the convenience surcharges. It is capital that vanished without materially improving your life or moving you 1 inch closer to your goals.
That distinction is critical. However, A lot of people hit a psychological wall here. They look at the leakage bucket, they see all the money they spent on dinners out or concert tickets, and they assume the next step is a life of severe austerity. They think the financial guides are going to tell them to never see the inside of a restaurant again.
And I would absolutely push back if that were the case. Like, if I hear stop the leakage, my immediate skeptical reaction is, wait, so I write all this down, confront the reality of my spending, and then what? Do I have to become a monk? Am I supposed to cut out every single piece of joy in my life and just sit in my apartment eating plain rice by candlelight until I'm 65?
The sources anticipate that exact fear and dismantle it beautifully. The goal of the 24-hour reset is absolutely not to eliminate joy from your existence. You work hard, you are fully entitled to enjoy the fruits of your labor. The core issue the guides are targeting is that your current enjoyment actually feels terrible.
Wait, what do you mean?
Think about it. When you buy a nice dinner, but the transaction is immediately followed by a wave of nauseating panic because you aren't completely sure if your rent check is going to bounce next week. That isn't joy.
Oh, yeah. The underlying guilt completely ruins the dopamine hit of the purchase anyway. You're paying premium prices for an experience coated in anxiety.
Therefore, the objective isn't to kill the fun. It is to give the fun a clearly defined, mathematically safe lane. It's about returning to intention. When you have mathematical proof that your survival bucket is completely covered and your growth bucket is actively funded, the money allocated to your fun lane can be spent with zero guilt. You can enjoy that expensive dinner because you know it isn't compromising your future.
That makes total sense. So if the first step is turning on the lights in that dark room and finally seeing the mess, the natural next question is, how do we actually clean it up? How do we permanently plug these leaks without relying on sheer willpower?
We have to restructure the environment. And that introduces a universal frustration the sources tackle head-on: the phenomenon of lifestyle creep.
Everyone listening to this has likely experienced this exact scenario. You work your tail off for 2 years, you finally get that promotion at work. It comes with a raise, maybe it's an extra $200 or $300 a month in net pay.
A great feeling.
It is. You celebrate, you feel a massive sense of relief, you think your financial stress is finally over. But somehow, miraculously, 6 months later, you look around and you are still living exactly paycheck to paycheck. The breathing room completely evaporated, the money just vanished into the ether.
Lifestyle creep is insidious because it is completely silent. Your baseline expectations for what you consider a necessity naturally expand to consume every single new dollar of income. When you are making less, the generic brand coffee at the grocery store was perfectly fine. After the raise, your brain subtly shifts the goalposts, and suddenly you need the premium artisanal beans.
Or your perfectly functional 3-year-old smartphone suddenly feels unacceptably slow, so you finance the newest model. You upgrade the car, you upgrade the apartment.
To actively fight this acclimatization, the guides recommend a deeply psychological exercise called the two lists technique. And the beauty is in its simplicity. You literally sit down with a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. On the left side, you write your upgrades list. On the right side, your freedom list.
It is a phenomenal framework for clarity. So your upgrades list represents your desire for immediate environmental comfort. It is everything you want right now to make your day-to-day life slightly nicer. The massive new television, the luxury car lease, the designer clothes, the better apartment.
But the freedom list is entirely different. This list is populated by things that literally buy your future self more options. It's paying off that suffocating credit card so you aren't mathematically tethered to a boss you hate. It's building a massive emergency fund so you have the psychological leverage to take a risk on a new career path. It's investing aggressively so you can reclaim your time and retire a decade early.
So lifestyle creep takes over your life when your upgrades list is 3 pages long and meticulously detailed, and your freedom list is completely blank.
Exactly. The visual representation of the two lists forces you to confront what you are actually prioritizing. To redirect the flow of capital toward freedom, we have to aggressively stop the leaks on the upgrade side. And the practical methodologies the sources provide for this are all rooted heavily in behavioral science.
This is where we move away from abstract philosophy and get into the trenches. We are talking about creating environmental friction. Willpower is a deeply flawed, highly exhaustible biological resource. If you rely purely on white-knuckling your way through discipline to stop spending money, you will inevitably fail the moment you get tired, hungry, or stressed.
The behavioral science here is absolutely vital. The sources suggest highly specific mechanical changes to your digital environment. They tell you to delete food delivery apps completely off your phone. They tell you to log into your favorite online retailers and manually scrub your saved credit card information from their databases. They tell you to dive into the settings and turn off any form of one-click buying.
It sounds almost too basic to work, but think about the reality of human behavior. Imagine you have a brutal, demoralizing day at the office. You sit in an hour of traffic. You finally plop down on your couch at 7 p.m. Your willpower battery is at 0%.
You're running on fumes.
Exactly. If that delivery app is sitting right there on your home screen and your credit card is already linked, you are ordering a $35 takeout meal in 3 seconds flat. The transaction is frictionless.
The decision is made and executed while your cognitive defenses are completely depleted. But if you followed the advice and deleted the app, think about the new process. Now you have to open your app store. You have to search for the app. You have to wait for it to download. You have to remember your password. You have to get off the couch, walk to your wallet, pull out your physical credit card, and meticulously type in a 16-digit number, the expiration date, and the CVV code.
You are intentionally introducing massive amounts of friction.
Exactly. You are giving your tired brain a mandatory buffer zone. During those 3 minutes of annoying data entry, your rational brain has a chance to wake up, tap you on the shoulder, and say, wait a minute, is this lukewarm burger actually worth $35 in an hour of my wages? Or can I just walk to the kitchen and boil some pasta? You are structurally protecting your future self from your current exhaustion.
Okay, so we've introduced the friction. We've paused the impulsive bleeding. Now we need a rigid system to actually manage the money we are finally retaining. The sources lay out a 4-account system. Instead of one massive checking account, you utilize 4 distinct lanes: bills, spending, emergency, and growth.
This is the operationalization of giving every dollar a job. For the vast majority of people, a paycheck arrives and gets dumped into one giant centralized checking account where all the upcoming rent money and all the potential weekend fun money are completely mingled together.
Right, it's just one big pool.
And when you operate that way, every single dollar in that account is available for every single emotion you happen to feel on any given Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. If you feel sad, that entire pool of money looks like potential retail therapy. It is a highly dangerous structural setup.
To dismantle that risk, you route the money into those 4 distinct lanes the very minute you get paid, before your emotions have a chance to assess the total balance. And the sources stress a point here that I think is incredibly encouraging for beginners.
What's that?
When you are first setting up these lanes, particularly the emergency or growth lanes, the raw mathematical amount you transfer matters far less than the psychological repetition of the habit. Even if you are just moving $10 a week into an emergency bucket, it's a vital, tangible vote for your own stability.
You're proving to yourself that you are someone who saves. You are actively building the identity of an investor, even on a micro scale.
Which leads us directly into the true purpose of that emergency bucket. One of the sources, a very practical guide from Sorted, presents a phenomenal reframe of this concept. They argue that you shouldn't even think of this money as an emergency fund or as savings, because those words have emotionally loose definitions. You should conceptualize it purely as self-insurance.
I found that reframe incredibly powerful. It fundamentally changes the psychological weight and purpose of the capital. You gladly pay premiums to insure your car against accidents, you insure your house against fire, you insure your health. This pool of cash is you actively insuring yourself against the inevitable chaotic reality of just being alive on Earth.
However, for this self-insurance to actually protect you, there must be incredibly strict, inflexible criteria governing what it can be used for. The sources are rigid on this. If you are going to dip into this shield, the expense must meet 3 non-negotiable rules simultaneously.
Let's hear.
It must be unexpected, it must be urgent, and it must be necessary.
Okay, let's run some real-world scenarios through that filter to see how strict it really is. Let's say your annual car registration is due. It's necessary, you have to pay it to drive legally. It might feel urgent if it's due tomorrow, but is it unexpected? Absolutely not. You literally knew it was coming for 365 days. Therefore, using the shield for it is a violation.
Good example.
How about you get an email alert for a flash sale on plane tickets to Vegas? It's unexpected, it's an urgent, expiring sale, but is it necessary for your survival? No. Violation.
If you bend those 3 rules, you degrade the structural integrity of the shield. Your brain will start finding excuses to raid the fund for conveniences. The shield is exclusively for the transmission that violently drops out of your car on the highway on a Tuesday morning. It's for the sudden medical bill. It is for the literal emergency that threatens your survival bucket.
So a listener might be nodding along right now, thinking, okay, the theory is bulletproof. I need self-insurance. But where on earth does the actual physical cash come from to fill this shield when my budget is already tight?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, but the guides don't leave you hanging here. They provide 4 highly actionable methods to extract hidden cash from your existing income.
Let's examine the mechanics of each. The first method is the one-week spending audit. You don't try to change your behavior at all. You just track every single penny you spend for 7 consecutive days using a notebook. The mere act of observation usually alters behavior, and people almost instantly find hidden waste just by being conscious of the outflow.
Just paying attention changes things.
Exactly. The second is the roundup method. This leverages technology. Many modern banking applications will automatically round up every debit card purchase you make to the nearest whole dollar and silently sweep that spare change into a separate savings account. You don't feel the loss of 40 cents here and 60 cents there, but it builds in visible, effortless progress over months.
I love that one. It's completely frictionless. The third tactic is active negotiation. I think this one is great because the return on time invested is massive. You pick just one fixed monthly bill, let's say your home internet provider. You don't just ask nicely, you do a tiny bit of research, find a promotional rate from a competitor, and you call the retention department.
And we should explicitly outline how that call goes because people are intimidated by it. You call them, you firmly state that you are reviewing your monthly expenses, and you note that a competitor is offering the exact same speed for $40 less. Then, and this is the hardest part, you stop talking. You embrace the awkward silence. You force a representative to counteroffer to keep your business.
That silence is so uncomfortable but so important. If they drop your bill by just $20 a month, that is $240 a year. The key rule from the sources is that you do not absorb that $20 back into your daily spending. You set up an automatic routing rule to sweep that exact $20 directly into your shield every single month. It is permanent structural savings.
The fourth method is the spending fast. You pick one highly specific discretionary category like buying lunch at work, and you brutally cut it to absolute zero for exactly 1 month. It is not a permanent lifestyle sentence. It is a temporary 30-day sprint.
Yeah.
All the cash you normally would have spent in that category is aggressively shoveled into the shield to build initial momentum.
But building new habits is messy. And the guides acknowledge human frailty here with a concept I think is just beautiful. It's the absolute necessity of forgiving yourself.
Oh, this is so important.
You are going to slip up. You are going to have an incredibly stressful week at work, your willpower will crack, and you will buy something stupid that violates your plan. Most people use that single failure as an excuse to completely abandon the entire system. They think, well, the budget is blown, might as well go wild.
The sources offer a powerful mantra to combat that exact fatalism: return faster. Financial perfection is a toxic myth. The people who ultimately succeed are not the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who build resilience. When you drop a stitch while knitting a sweater, you don't throw the entire sweater into the fireplace. You just pick up the needle and keep knitting.
Right.
If you blow the budget on a Wednesday, you don't write off the rest of a month. You acknowledge the mistake, forgive yourself, and return faster to the system on Thursday morning.
That mental pivot from demanding perfection to prioritizing recovery is what prepares you for the long game. Because once your shield is fully built, once you have that robust buffer of self-insurance protecting your survival, you are finally in a position to look at the actual engine of wealth creation. Which brings us to the core mathematics of Phase 3, compound interest.
This is the pivot point of the entire deep dive. Everyone, on some level, has heard the phrase compound interest. But the sources make a compelling case that most people fundamentally underestimate the sheer, uncompromising mathematical violence of how it actually operates over long time horizons.
Here is where it gets really interesting. Let's ground this abstract math using a classic physical analogy from the guides: the snowball rolling down a snow-covered hill.
When you first pack a snowball in your hands and start rolling it down a gentle slope, it's tiny. On its first full rotation, it only picks up a microscopic layer of new snow. The growth is barely visible to the naked eye. But as it continues to roll, its overall surface area physically expands. This means on the 10th rotation, it is gathering new snow, but crucially, it is also gathering snow on top of the snow it just picked up a second ago.
Let's map the actual foundational math from the Money Hub source onto that snowball to prove why this is so explosive. Let's assume you have a starting principal of $10,000 and you find an investment yielding a reliable 5% annual return.
We have to contrast this with simple interest to see the power. If you're earning simple interest, the snowball never grows its surface area. You just earn a flat 5% on your original $10,000 every single year, regardless of how much time passes. So in year 1, you get a check for $500. Year 2, another flat $500. Year 10, $500. The growth is purely linear. It is a slow, steady, predictable trudge.
But compound interest physically alters the underlying mathematics. In year 1, yes, you get your $500, but in year 2, the environment changes. You are no longer earning 5% on your original 10 grand. The snowball has absorbed the new snow into its core. You are now earning 5% on $10,500.
Because the base is larger, your interest payment in year 2 increases to $525. By year 3, you're earning 5% on $11,025, which yields over $551. Over just those first 3 short years, the total interest generated is $1,576.25, and that curve bends upward exponentially. It only gets steeper and more aggressive the longer you let it roll.
But as I was reviewing these numbers, I noticed the guide spent a lot of time discussing the frequency of the compounding, specifically comparing quarterly compounding to monthly compounding. And honestly, my initial reaction was skepticism. The difference seemed completely negligible.
At a micro level, it does appear negligible. Let's look at the exact mathematical example they use to justify focusing on it. They take that same $10,000 at 5% over 3 years, and they factor in a 28% tax rate to make a real-world scenario. If that money compounds quarterly, which is standard for many basic bank term deposits, your final value after 3 years is exactly $11,157.43.
Right.
But if you find an account that compounds monthly, your final value reaches $11,162.60.
Right. So we are talking about a grand total difference of roughly $5 over 36 months. Why on earth should the listener care about optimizing for $5?
You have to zoom out and look at the structural mechanics of what that $5 represents. That tiny difference is the microscopic friction of your money being applied to the principal faster. When the bank applies your interest monthly instead of quarterly, that tiny bit of new money is locked into the core and starts earning its own interest 30 to 60 days sooner. Over 3 years, yes, the difference is the price of a cup of coffee. But stretch that exact same structural efficiency over 30 or 40 years of investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that microscopic friction completely alters your final net worth by tens of thousands of dollars.
Which perfectly sets up the absolute ultimate foil for this entire mathematical engine: time. The sources present a comparative case study between 2 hypothetical investors, Sam and Alex. And the math in this scenario is something I want every single person listening to absolutely burn into their memory.
The Sam and Alex scenario is the definitive proof that time in the market matters vastly more than the timing of the market, or even the total amount invested.
Okay, lay it out.
Here is the setup. Sam understands compounding early. She starts investing $2,000 a year starting at age 25. Alex decides he wants to wait until he feels more settled. He delays his investing journey. He eventually starts investing the exact same amount, $2,000 a year, but he waits until age 35 to begin. It is exactly a 10-year delay.
Let's assume they both earn the exact same 5% annualized return. They both stop at age 65. Sam, because she started at 25, finishes her journey with a portfolio worth $241,599.55.
Now look at Alex. He invested the exact same annual amount. He got the exact same rate of return. He just waited a single decade to push his snowball off the hill. Alex finishes at age 65 with just $132,877.70.
A mere 10-year delay in starting costs Alex over $108,000 in lost potential wealth. Sam essentially has double the money, and I want to emphasize this. She didn't pick a magical tech stock. She didn't work longer hours. She didn't inherit a fortune. She literally just allowed the mathematics of time to do the heavy lifting. Time is the ultimate, irreplaceable fuel for wealth creation.
But we have to look at the reverse of this equation. If we connect this raw, undeniable power to the broader financial system, it reveals a terrifying reality. If this mathematical engine is universally understood by global financial institutions to be this powerful at generating wealth, what happens when the banks turn that exact same engine around and point it directly at you?
Oh man, this is the dark side of the moon. This is how compound interest functions as an inescapable debt trap. If the math works for you to build wealth, it works against you to destroy wealth with the exact same ruthless efficiency.
To understand the trap, you have to understand a banking concept called the spread. Banks and credit card lenders are not public services. They are highly optimized profit engines. They borrow massive amounts of money from the central bank or broader market at a very low rate, let's say 5%. They then turn around and lend that exact same money to you, the everyday consumer, at 15, 20, or even 24% on a credit card.
That gap between the 5% they pay and the 24% they charge you is their profit margin, and it is astronomical.
And because that margin is so lucrative, the entire lending system is psychologically and mathematically designed to keep you paying interest for as long as humanly possible. They want your debt snowball rolling down their hill forever. They actively do not want you to pay off the principal quickly.
The absolute most brutal manifestation of this in the sources is the mechanics of credit cards. Because credit cards do not compound quarterly, they do not compound monthly. High-interest credit cards compound daily.
Daily compounding is brutal.
Every single day, at the close of business, the bank's algorithm takes your massive annual interest rate, divides it by 365 days, and applies that tiny fraction of interest directly to your outstanding balance. Every single night while you are sleeping, your debt is literally regenerating and expanding.
Let's trace the exact horrifying case study from the text to see how this daily compounding traps well-meaning people. Let's look at a hypothetical borrower named Jane. Jane has accumulated a credit card balance of exactly $7,000. The interest rate on her card is a punishing 23.99%. Now, Jane wants to be responsible, so she is doing exactly what the credit card company suggests in bold print on her monthly statement. She is faithfully paying the 3% minimum payment every month.
This is where the math feels almost criminal to me. When Jane sends in that minimum payment, she assumes she is paying down her $7,000 debt. But almost all of that money is instantly devoured by the bank just to pay off the new interest that was generated over the last 30 days of daily compounding. The actual principal balance, that original $7,000, barely shrinks at all. It might drop by a few pennies. So when the next billing cycle starts, the daily 23.99% interest rate is being applied to almost the exact same massive balance.
You had a really vivid mechanical analogy for this when we were reviewing the notes earlier. It captures the futility perfectly.
Yeah, paying the minimum on a high-interest, daily compounding credit card is exactly like trying to empty a massive swimming pool using only a tiny teaspoon, while somebody else has a heavy-duty industrial garden hose running full blast into the deep end. You are sweating, you are working incredibly hard, you feel the exhaustion of the effort, but the water level simply is not dropping. The influx of new water outpaces your ability to remove it.
It's designed to swallow a person's future income entirely. So the practical question for the listener becomes, how do we actually fight this? How do you dismantle a mathematical engine that is explicitly designed to drain you?
You have to aggressively starve their snowball. And the battle plan outlined in the sources is the exact deliberate inverse of the wealth-building strategies we just discussed.
Precisely. First, you have to radically alter the concept of minimum payments. You must establish a higher fixed payment amount that ignores the bank's suggested minimum. You have to vault over that massive interest hump. Even paying an extra $30 or $40 a month above the minimum bypasses the newly generated interest and acts as a direct surgical strike against the underlying principal balance. You have to shrink the core of their snowball.
You can also disrupt their daily compounding cycle by altering the frequency of your payments. If the bank is compounding the math against you every single day, you hit them with weekly micropayments instead of waiting for the monthly due date. Every time you make a mid-month payment, you constantly knock the principal down before it has the time to generate as much compounding friction against you.
And finally, when you're dealing with multiple debts, you have to organize your attack logically, using either the avalanche or the snowball method.
What's the difference between the two?
Well, the avalanche method is for the purely mathematically focused brain. You list all your debts, find the one with the absolute highest interest rate, and you attack it with every spare dollar you have while paying minimums on the rest. You ignore the size of the balance and focus purely on the interest rate, because mathematically, this saves you the most money and clears the debt the fastest.
But what I found fascinating is that the sources heavily advocate for the snowball method for a massive percentage of people, actively ignoring the mathematical supremacy of the avalanche.
Yeah, they lean heavily into the behavioral side.
Exactly. With the snowball method, you attack the smallest balance first, regardless of the interest rate. You pay it off, you experience a massive sudden psychological win by seeing an account hit zero, and you use that emotional momentum to attack the next biggest balance. It is an acknowledgement that consumer debt is deeply rooted in emotional behavior, not just raw math. You need dopamine hits to sustain a multi-year debt payoff journey.
That behavioral insight is crucial. But let's look forward. Let's say a listener has done the agonizing hard work. They've starved their high-interest debt down to zero, they've built an impenetrable financial shield using the 24-hour reset, and now finally they have some surplus capital. They're ready to harness the engine of compound interest to build their own wealth. Where do they actually park their money? How do they deploy it safely?
This brings us to phase 4, smart investing and the psychological traps that destroy returns.
Which immediately leads to the most fundamental question in investing: stocks versus bonds.
The guides do a truly excellent job demystifying the core mechanics of these two vehicles. Because I know you listening probably already know the absolute basics, I like to frame the difference mechanically. Buying a stock is like buying a physical seat at the owner's table of a business. You are buying equity. You get a say, you share in the massive profits when the business scales globally, but you also absorb the direct impact if the business fails. If the restaurant burns to the ground, your investment burns with it. You fully own the risk in exchange for the infinite upside.
Conversely, buying a bond is like you choosing to act as the bank yourself. You are issuing a direct loan to a massive entity, either a federal government or a large corporation. In return for your capital, they sign a contract promising to pay you regular, fixed interest payments over a set period, and they guarantee to return your original principal amount at the very end of the term.
This raises an important question, and it's something the Sorted Guide meticulously dismantles. People hear the word bond, they hear the word guaranteed, and they instinctively think perfectly safe money. They view bonds as a vault, but bonds have incredibly complex hidden risks that can destroy your wealth if you don't understand them, right?
They absolutely do. The pervasive myth that bonds are completely risk-free is one of the most dangerous assumptions a beginner can make. Let's deeply analyze the 4 hidden risks the sources identify.
Okay, let's go through them.
The first is interest rate risk, and it is a mechanical seesaw. Imagine you buy a 10-year government bond that pays you a solid 4% interest rate. You are thrilled with the stability. But a year later, the global economy shifts, inflation rises, and to combat it, new bonds are suddenly being issued at 6%.
Right, so my locked-in 4% bond suddenly looks like a terrible deal compared to the new stuff on the market.
Exactly. Now, if you hold that bond all the way to year 10, you are fine. You get your money back. But if you face an emergency and need to sell your bond on the secondary market in year 2, no rational investor is going to pay you full price for your 4% bond when they can easily go buy a brand new 6% bond from the government. To convince a buyer to take your inferior bond, you have to sell it at a steep mathematical discount. You are locked into a mathematically worse deal, and you lose principal value if you need liquidity.
Okay, the second trap is inflation risk. And I think this one is the most insidious because it is completely invisible on your account statement. Let's say you are locked into a safe corporate bond earning 3% a year. Your statement says your account balance is growing. But if real-world inflation spikes to 5%, the cost of groceries and housing is rising faster than your wealth. Your money is technically growing in absolute numbers, but its actual real-world purchasing power is actively shrinking. You are bleeding wealth invisibly.
The third is liquidity risk. This is particularly true for corporate bonds. If you buy a bond from a mid-sized company and you suddenly need to sell it to raise cash to fix a collapsed roof on your house, there is absolutely no guarantee you will instantly find a willing buyer for that specific bond on the secondary market. It is not nearly as liquid as just hitting the sell button on a share of Apple or Microsoft where millions of shares trade every second. You might be stuck holding it.
And the fourth major risk is priority, which comes into play in worst-case scenarios. When you buy corporate bonds, you need to understand exactly where you stand in the legal hierarchy if that specific company goes bankrupt and liquidates its assets. The guides make a critical distinction between senior bonds and subordinated bonds.
This is a huge distinction.
It is. If you hold a senior bond, you are standing at the very front of the line to get whatever scraps of cash the bankrupt company generates from selling off its desks and computers. But if you hold a subordinated bond, you are relegated to the very back of the line behind the banks and the senior debt holders. By the time the liquidators get to you, the money is gone. You might get absolutely nothing. That's exactly why subordinated bonds offer higher interest rates to tempt greedy investors into taking that back-of-the-line risk without reading the fine print.
So, when a beginner is faced with all these underlying complexities, hidden risks, and moving parts, how do they actually construct a rational portfolio without needing a finance degree? The USAA Educational Foundation source provides a wonderfully pragmatic mechanical solution called the timeline rule. It completely removes the guesswork and ties your choice of investment vehicle directly to the calendar date when you need to spend the cash.
It is such a clean, logical framework. Here is how the timeline rule dictates your actions. If your financial goal is short-term, meaning you absolutely need the physical cash in 0 to 3 years, like you are saving for a down payment on a house or planning a wedding, you must ruthlessly prioritize cash equivalents and maximum safety. You cannot put that down payment money into the stock market because you simply cannot risk a sudden 30% macroeconomic market crash right before you need to write the check to the mortgage broker.
Moving out the timeline. If your goal is intermediate, say you need the money in 4 to 6 years, you need a balanced hybrid approach. A mixture of high-quality bonds to provide structural stability and act as an anchor, combined with some conservative equities to outpace inflation.
But if your goal is genuinely long-term, 7 years, 10 years, or a 30-year retirement horizon, that is where the rule states you must fully embrace the chaotic, fluctuating risks of the stock market. You have the massive runway of time necessary to ride out the inevitable historical crashes and capture the significantly higher aggregate rewards that equities provide over decades.
I like to use a mechanical analogy here. Think of bonds as the heavy-duty shock absorbers on your vehicle. They don't make the car go faster, but they ensure you don't violently crash off the road when you inevitably hit a massive economic pothole. Stocks, however, are the massive sails on a ship catching the high winds. They are turbulent, they will toss the boat around, but they are the only thing providing actual, aggressive forward momentum toward your destination.
Okay, so we understand the vehicles, we understand the timeline rule, but here is where the entire system spectacularly falls apart for millions of average people. None of this immaculate logic matters if your primitive human brain panics and you emotionally crash the car into a tree.
Human nature is the biggest risk factor.
Absolutely. The Saxo Bank Guide provides what is essentially a masterclass in behavioral economics by meticulously outlining the predictable emotional mistakes that destroy beginner portfolios. Let's walk through the psychology of failure using a hypothetical, perfectly average investor. The source is named Dave.
Poor Dave.
Oh.
He represents every instinct we have to fight. Let's analyze his catastrophic journey step by step. Dave finally decides he wants to be an investor. He goes to a weekend neighborhood barbecue, has a few beers, and his buddy starts aggressively hyping up this revolutionary new biotech company. His buddy sounds incredibly confident, tossing around buzzwords. Dave goes home, gets completely caught up in the fear of missing out FOMO, and on Monday morning he dumps his entire life savings into that one single stock.
Mistake number 1 is glaring. Dave completely failed to diversify. He just tied his entire financial existence and his family's future to the erratic mood swings and business acumen of one single CEO he has never met. To combat this, the sources hammer home the immense value of ETFs, exchange-traded funds.
ETFs are a game changer.
They are. I like to explain an ETF as a financial variety pack. Instead of trying to arrogantly guess which single company will survive the next decade, you buy one single ETF that automatically holds a microscopic sliver of hundreds or even thousands of different companies. If Dave's miraculous biotech company goes bankrupt due to a failed drug trial, the other 499 thriving companies in the ETF hold his overall portfolio up. It is structural risk mitigation.
But Dave didn't buy the boring, diversified ETF. He bought the single hype stock. And predictably, 2 weeks later, the biotech company reports terrible quarterly earnings. The stock plummets 30% in a single afternoon. The financial news channels are flashing bright red banners screaming about a massive, unprecedented global market crash.
Dave's stomach drops.
He is absolutely terrified he is going to lose his entire life savings, so he logs into his brokerage account in a cold sweat and hits the sell button, pulling out whatever battered reduced cash he has left, just to make the emotional pain stop.
Mistake number 2. Selling in a downturn due to loss aversion. And this isn't just a lack of financial education. This is deeply embedded in our psychological hardware.
It is literally hardwired into our evolutionary biology. Behavioral economists have proven that humans are neurologically wired to feel the psychological pain of a financial loss, roughly twice as intensely as we feel the pleasure of an equivalent financial gain. And it makes evolutionary sense. In our ancient hunter-gatherer days of caloric scarcity, losing a guaranteed meal meant potential starvation and death. Finding an extra meal was just a nice temporary luxury. We are biologically programmed by millions of years of evolution to panic and retreat from losses in order to survive.
But that exact same biological survival instinct is profoundly toxic when applied to the modern stock market. Because when Dave panic sells his shares during a temporary 30% dip, all he has practically accomplished is permanently locking in his mathematical loss. Historically, the broader market always eventually recovers from crashes and reaches new all-time highs, but Dave won't be there to participate in the recovery because he completely cashed out of the game.
Which perfectly highlights Dave's third major mistake. He completely ignored his own personal risk tolerance. He invested way too aggressively in a highly volatile asset when his actual internal emotional capacity could not handle the inevitable turbulence. He built a roller coaster when he only had the stomach for a carousel.
So now Dave is severely burned. He's bitter at the system. He decides the stock market is a rigged casino and he's done with it. He tells himself he will only ever invest again if he happens to magically have some leftover money at the end of the year.
Mistake 4. Failing to prioritize. Treating investing as an afterthought, relying on leftover capital, mathematically guarantees it will never happen. Human life, by its very nature, always finds a way to consume leftover money.
The refrigerator compressor breaks.
The car desperately needs new tires.
You get invited to a destination wedding.
Exactly. You have to treat your automated investments with the exact same non-negotiable urgency as your monthly electricity bill. You pay your future self first before the money is available to be consumed by daily friction.
Eventually, a few years pass, the pain fades, and Dave gets antsy again. He sees some random meme stock rocketing up on social media. People are posting diamond and rocket ship emojis. He jumps back in, dumping cash into the stock with absolutely zero idea what the company actually produces, what their debt levels are, or who the leadership team is.
Mistake 5. Total lack of fundamental research. He completely ignores the mechanics of the underlying business. He is not investing capital. He is quite literally gambling on momentum.
And finally, after getting burned again, Dave decides he is going to outsmart the entire global financial system. He sells everything, moves all his money into a cash savings account, and decides he will just wait and watch the news. He plans to hold cash until the exact moment the market hits rock bottom during the next recession, and then he will brilliantly buy back in at the absolute perfect time.
Mistake 6. Attempting to time the market. And from an analytical perspective, this is arguably the single most destructive behavioral pattern of all. People inherently, arrogantly believe they possess the intelligence and foresight to jump out of the market right before a crash and flawlessly jump back in right before a massive surge.
But the historical data from the sources completely obliterates the idea that this is possible. The market's absolute biggest, most explosive days of growth are usually highly concentrated into just a handful of random trading days. And crucially, those explosive days of growth almost always occur immediately following massive, terrifying market drops when volatility is at its absolute peak and emotional investors are too terrified to buy.
This leads to the most terrifying, sobering statistic from the research on market timing. If you're sitting on the sidelines in cash, arrogantly trying to wait for the perfect entry moment, and you happen to miss just the 10 single best-performing days in the market over an entire decade, your overall portfolio returns can be cut entirely in half compared to a boring investor who just stayed fully invested through the crashes and the peaks.
Let that statistic really sink in. Missing just 10 specific days over 10 years destroys half of your potential wealth. It provides mathematical proof for the old Wall Street adage, time in the market consistently, ruthlessly beats timing the market.
So the practical takeaway is, how do you systematically protect yourself from your own evolutionary biology? How do you bypass all these emotional traps and avoid becoming dazed? The sources universally recommend a rigid mechanical strategy called dollar cost averaging, or DCA.
DCA is brilliantly, beautifully boring. It simply means you commit to investing a fixed dollar amount, let's say $200, every single month, completely automatically. It happens on the first of the month, every month, regardless of whether the financial news is predicting a golden age or a total global collapse. You ignore the noise.
The mechanics of DCA are elegant because they naturally flip your detrimental emotional responses into an advantage. Think about how the math works. When the market is crashing, prices are plummeting, and everyone else is panicking, your fixed $200 automatically buys more shares of the ETF. The shares are essentially on a massive discount sale, and you're buying them automatically without needing the courage to click the button.
And the reverse is true as well.
Conversely, when the market is booming, prices are sky high, and everyone is greedy, that exact same $200 naturally buys fewer shares. You are automatically avoiding overcommitting at the top of a bubble. Over a long time horizon, this smooths out your average purchase price and completely violently removes your panicked monkey brain emotions from the equation.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the listener who hears all of this, the risks, the volatility, the complex psychology, and says, you know what? This sounds entirely too stressful. I don't want to learn about ETFs. I don't want to risk being Dave. I'm just going to take my savings, keep it in physical cash, and lock it in a fireproof safe under my bed where I know exactly, to the penny, how much is there, safe and sound.
This is where we have to confront the ultimate silent killer of wealth: inflation. The perspective shift required here is massive. Because of the relentless march of inflation, the purchasing power of that physical cash sitting in the safe under your bed is actively, continuously deteriorating every single day. A $100 bill today will buy a significantly smaller basket of groceries in 10 years.
So, ironically, the absolute biggest financial risk you can possibly take with your life savings is choosing not to invest it at all.
Precisely. If you let your money sit stagnant in a safe, you are not protecting it. You are mathematically guaranteeing a permanent loss of purchasing power over your lifetime. You have to expose the capital to calculated risk. You have to put the money to work in the broader economy to outpace the decay of inflation.
All right, let's take a breath and review where we are. We've covered all the defensive maneuvers. We've audited and optimized the cash flow. We've built the rigid financial shield to protect against emergencies. We've explored the massive compounding engine, and we've set up automated investments to bypass our own terrible psychology.
We've done a lot of groundwork.
But we have to address a very real, very harsh mathematical reality that the guides highlight. Sometimes hyper-optimizing your budget simply isn't enough to reach your goals. You can only cut your expenses down to a baseline of zero. There is a floor to frugality. At some point, if you truly want to accelerate your wealth building, you simply need a larger shovel. You need more income. Which brings us to the final frontier, Phase 5, expanding the pipeline and the $0 startup.
The growth vault sources tackle this income generation problem head-on. And they start by aggressively challenging the single most pervasive, limiting myth in modern entrepreneurship: the deeply ingrained idea that you need money to make money.
We hear that all the time.
We are culturally conditioned to believe that starting a business requires taking out a massive, terrifying bank loan, leasing an expensive commercial storefront, buying a warehouse full of risky inventory, or pitching angel investors in Silicon Valley.
But the historical evidence provided in the guides completely refutes that narrative. Look at the specific examples they provide to prove the point. Craigslist, which at one point dominated classified ads globally, started as a completely free, simple email list sent between a handful of friends in San Francisco to share local events.
WordPress is another great example.
Yeah, WordPress was originally just a clunky personal side project coded by a guy who wanted a better way to publish his blog. Today, it is the underlying architecture for a massive percentage of the entire global internet. MailChimp started as a tiny side hustle project for a web design agency that just needed a way to email their existing clients. None of these massive industry-defining giants began with a giant pile of venture capital cash. They started by simply solving a highly specific problem for a small group of people using the cheap or free tools they already had access to.
So the practical question for the listener is, how do you actually replicate that low-risk model today? When you have exactly zero startup capital to invest, the fastest, highest margin path to generating new income is monetizing your existing invisible skills by packaging them as a service.
You aren't buying a shipping container full of plastic products from overseas and praying they sell on Amazon before the storage fees bankrupt you. You aren't spending 6 agonizing months locked in a basement trying to develop a complex software application that no one might download. You are simply selling your time, your organization, and your specific expertise directly to people who lack it.
The guides give a really concrete, accessible example: becoming a virtual assistant. Let's say you are naturally highly organized. You can go on a platform like LinkedIn right now, find a busy, overwhelmed, mid-level executive, and offer to relentlessly manage and filter their chaotic email inbox for just 5 hours a week at $30 an hour.
That simple transaction generates an extra $600 a month in pure profit, with absolutely zero financial startup costs beyond the internet connection you already pay for.
But what's really fascinating here is the evolution of that basic concept, an advanced strategy the sources refer to as drop servicing or service arbitrage.
Oh, this is the high margin playbook. This is where the concept of the $0 startup gets incredibly clever. I want to dive deep into this.
Let's meticulously detail the exact example the guides use to explain service arbitrage. Let's say you are walking down the street and you notice a local business, maybe an established, successful landscaping company with a fleet of trucks. But you look them up on your phone and realize their website looks like it was built in 1998 and is completely broken on mobile.
A common scenario.
Very common. You walk in, find the owner, and you pitch them a comprehensive modern web design package for $1,500. You highlight how much business they are losing because of their broken site. You successfully sell the vision, and they sign the contract. But here is the catch. You don't actually know a single thing about writing HTML or coding a website.
Now, let me push back on this exact scenario because I know what the listener's thinking. Wait a minute. If I don't know how to build a website and the landscaper's paying me $1,500, aren't I just acting as a parasitic middleman? Why wouldn't the landscaper just go online and hire someone cheaper themselves?
That is the most common objection to arbitrage, but it fundamentally misunderstands the value of time for a business owner. The landscaper is an expert at running crews, buying fertilizer, and managing logistics. He does not have the time, the desire, or the technical vocabulary to go onto a global freelance platform, sort through 500 portfolios from developers in 8 different time zones, interview candidates, negotiate rates, and meticulously manage a software project timeline.
So you provide the convenience.
The value you provide is curation, trust, and project management. Once you secure that $1,500 contract, you go to a global freelance platform like Upwork. You utilize your time to find a highly talented, vetted web developer in a lower cost of living area, and you contract them to build the site to your specifications for $700.
So you act purely as the project manager. You handle all the client communication. You translate the landscaper's vague ideas into technical instructions for the developer. You ensure the final quality meets the standard. And you deliver the finished product back to the client.
And because you manage the friction and bridge the gap between the local need and the global talent, you keep the remaining $800 margin as pure profit. You performed arbitrage on the service itself, you found the localized demand, you sourced the global supply, and you captured the massive margin in the middle without ever learning how to code. It's a brilliant, highly scalable model.
But, and this is a massive flashing red but in the sources, the guides are explicitly clear that before you spend 3 weeks designing a fancy logo for your new drop servicing agency or writing a 50-page business plan or legally registering a company name, you absolutely must secure what they call a validation insurance policy.
Because the historical failure rate for new ventures is terrifying. The guide drops a sobering statistic here. 42% of all startups completely fail for one simple, brutal, preventable reason. They spend months of their lives and thousands of hours building a product or a service that absolutely nobody in the real world actually wants to buy.
It is the ultimate tragic waste of human energy, building a perfect solution to a problem that doesn't exist. To mathematically prevent this tragedy, the sources outline a strict, non-negotiable 4-step validation process.
What's the first step?
Step 1. Rigidly define the exact problem you are solving in one sentence. Do not focus on the features of your product. Focus entirely on the pain point of the customer. Step 2. Get out of your house and actually talk to potential customers, face-to-face or voice-to-voice over the phone.
And this is where so many aspiring entrepreneurs freeze. People are intensely irrationally scared of this step. They sit in their rooms and think, if I go out and tell people my brilliant business idea, some billionaire or massive corporation is going to hear it, steal it, and crush me.
The guides practically laugh at this fear. The harsh reality is that absolutely nobody cares about your unproven idea enough to steal it. Execution is 1,000 times harder than ideation. The actual genuine risk is not that your idea gets stolen. The real risk is that you let your ego convince you to build it in total secretive silence for 6 months, and then you launch it to a world that responds with absolute crickets.
Exactly. Negative feedback during the validation phase is absolute gold. It prevents you from wasting years of your life. Step 3 of the process. Aggressively check the competition. If you have an idea and you discover someone else is already doing it, amateur entrepreneurs get discouraged and quit. The sources argue you should celebrate.
Why celebrate?
Because competition is actually a fantastic sign. It proves, without a doubt, that a paying market for this service actually exists. It validates the demand. And finally, step 4. Get a tangible commitment before you build. The sources note that you don't even necessarily need to collect money up front to validate an idea. If you can simply explain your solution and get a target customer to willingly hand over their primary email address to be notified when you eventually launch, that acts as a powerful sign of true, tangible interest.
Once you have dragged your idea through that rigorous validation process and the service is actually working and real money starts flowing into your accounts, the guides briefly but firmly touch on the boring, unglamorous, but absolutely vital administrative stuff, making the business official without creating a massive legal or tax headache for yourself down the road.
We are talking about legal structure and taxation. It's definitely not the glamorous part of entrepreneurship, but ignoring it will completely destroy the wealth you just worked so hard to build. The sources explain the fundamental structural difference between operating as a sole trader versus incorporating as a company.
Think of a sole trader as basically operating as a one-person band. Legally speaking, you and the business are the exact same entity. All the money flows directly to you. It's incredibly easy and cheap to set up. But there's a massive hidden risk. If the business accidentally causes damage and gets sued by a client, the lawyers can come directly after your personal assets. They can take your personal savings or force the sale of your car to settle the business debt.
A company, on the other hand, acts as a completely separate, fictional legal entity. It is a protective shell. It offers a shield between the business's liabilities and your personal assets. However, creating and maintaining that shield requires significantly more paperwork, accounting fees, and regulatory compliance.
And crucially, you have to intimately understand your local tax thresholds from day one. The source material, which heavily draws from a New Zealand regulatory context, explicitly mentions the $60,000 GST, or Goods and Services Tax, rule as a prime example. You absolutely have to know at what exact revenue point your local government legally requires you to start actively collecting and remitting sales tax on top of your prices.
Ignorance is no excuse here.
Right. If you are ignorant of the rules and you blindly cross that revenue threshold without collecting the tax from your clients, the government doesn't care about your ignorance. You will personally owe a massive, catastrophic tax bill at the end of the financial year that you entirely failed to budget for.
Doing your boring administrative homework early is what allows you the freedom to focus entirely on the actual growth and execution of the business later.
If we pull all the way back now and connect all of these incredibly dense phases to the broader narrative we've built, we can truly appreciate the sheer scale of the journey we've charted for the listener today.
It is a massive, comprehensive arc of financial transformation.
It truly is. We started by confronting the fear of the dark room, identifying and capturing the invisible leaks that cause so much ambient anxiety through the rigid honesty of the 24-hour reset. We took those leaks, reorganized the capital, and redirected it to build a rigid, unbreachable financial shield, fundamentally turning the concept of savings into a powerful psychology of self-insurance against the chaos of life.
Then we leveled up and looked at the raw, undeniable mathematics of the compounding engine. We saw how the immense runway of time fuels it, and conversely, how the banking system weaponizes it to create inescapable debt traps. We navigated the treacherous, emotional monkey brain traps of the investing world, learning what not to do from poor, panicked Dave. And we established the absolute necessity of automated dollar cost averaging to structurally protect us from our own evolutionary biology.
And finally, we expanded the horizon entirely. We realized that when the budget is perfectly optimized and the defensive shield is built, our own latent, invisible skills can be aggressively monetized with zero startup capital. Through the clever leverage of service arbitrage and careful, rigorous market validation, we can literally manufacture our own surplus income. It is a complete, holistic ecosystem of financial control.
But the single core philosophy holding that entire complex ecosystem together, a direct quote drawn straight from the heart of the Growth Vault material, is the simple concept of return faster. I want you, the listener, to let that phrase echo in your mind. Perfection is a dangerous, paralyzing myth.
It really is.
Over the course of a 30-year financial journey, you will inevitably blow your budget. You will occasionally miss a monthly savings goal because life happens. You might even succumb to fear and panic sell a stock one day during a horrific market crash. The people who ultimately win the financial game are not the ones who act like perfect, unemotional robots. They are simply the resilient ones who recognize their mistakes, forgive themselves, and recover from those slip-ups the fastest.
They drop the stitch, but they don't burn the sweater. They pick up the needle and return to the system the very next morning. So, as we wrap up this massive deep dive, your personal call to action today is intentionally simple. Do not succumb to paralysis by analysis. Do not try to perfectly implement all 50 complex mechanics we just unpacked over the last hour.
Just pick one.
Yes, just pick one single action today. Comb through your bank statement and confidently cancel one leaky, unused subscription. Move just $10 from checking to start funding one Shield bucket. Or go onto LinkedIn and send one single direct message offering your organizational skills as a service. Just take one mechanical action to definitively prove to yourself that you are finally sitting in the driver's seat.
As we close out, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over in the quiet moments today. It is something we didn't explicitly unpack in the main discussion, but it is heavily, inevitably implied by the natural mechanics we've explored. We've established mathematically that compound interest is the engine of your money working tirelessly for you while you sleep. And we've established that drop servicing and arbitrage is the engine of other people's specialized skills working for you while you simply manage the flow.
It is the absolute ultimate expression of leverage.
It is. So I want you to genuinely ask yourself this. What happens to your daily life, your identity, and your entire reality the moment those automated systems, the quiet compounding of your ETF investments, and the managed arbitrage of your $0 startup finally cross the mathematical threshold and start out earning the physical, grinding labor of your own two hands?
Oh, wow. That is the tipping point.
When you finally reach that mathematical singularity and the financial engine you built completely sustains your existence without requiring your daily physical input, what will you actually do with all that massively reclaimed time? Who do you become when survival is no longer the primary objective of your day?
Because once that terrifying $500 surprise bill in the mail goes from being a heart-stopping existential crisis to just a minor, slightly annoying administrative task that your automated systems handle in the background, the entire world and your place in it completely opens up. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Growth Vault. We'll see you next time.